Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy, and in today's video, I'm going to be going over the top 5 biggest mistakes that I see people make when they purchase a car. With that being said, let's get right into it. The first big mistake that I see people make is not looking into the total cost of purchasing a car. Most people know about the out-the-door price, but there's more than just the out-the-door price when it comes to the total cost of buying a car. So let's go over all of those costs. First is the car itself. And then most states will charge sales tax. So you got to add sales tax and then title licensing and then dealer fees. And this is what most people will call the out-the-door price. But there's more on top of that. If you're financing the car, you need to also add the finance cost that's going to go into purchasing this car. And then the next thing that I recommend adding into this total cost equation is at minimum the first year of maintenance, how much that's going to cost in the car. But what I would do that would be even better is however long you're planning on keeping the car, take how much the maintenance is going to cost over your ownership period and throw that into the equation so you can see how much this car is actually going to cost you. And I think if people actually added the maintenance cost plus the finance cost into the equation when they buy a car, they would actually reconsider their car purchase because they would go, wait a second, I thought this car was $50,000, but plus tax, title, licensing, now it's $55,000, plus $10,000 in finance charge, plus the maintenance schedule on this car is kind of expensive, so I have to spend another, let's say $2,000, $3,000 over the course of my loan period. Well, now this $50,000 car is almost $70,000. Do I really want to spend $70,000 on this vehicle? So that is the first mistake that I see people making, is not looking at the total cost, right? They just look at the out-the-door price. There's more than just tax, title, licensing, and dealer fees. The next big mistake that I see people make is not look up the weight of a car before they buy it and not look up the dimensions of a car, and especially when they're comparing different vehicles against each other. I think this is really important to do because different cars have different styles on the exterior, and depending on how the car is stylized will determine how big or small the car looks. You can have two cars that are the exact same dimension specs on the exterior, but they could look two completely different sizes depending on how the sheet metal is shaped. I'm going to use my 200 series Toyota Land Cruiser as a great example. So a lot of people, when they look at this car, they think that it is gargantuan, that it is way bigger than a Toyota 4Runner. In reality, the 200 series Land Cruiser is barely bigger than a 4Runner. It's only about 3 inches longer and is pretty much the same width as a 4Runner. So why does it look a lot bigger? Well, the 4Runner has fender flares, so it has a narrower body, but it still has the width because of the fender flares. This has no fender flares. The body is wider, which gives you a lot more space inside, but it means that, again, the vehicle width is the same as a 4Runner. And then, it does have a little bit of extra length. But that's really what makes this car look so much bigger. It's because they've taken the body out instead of just adding on fender flares like what they've done with the 4Runner. And so if you look at those specs, then what you'll find is, well, the Land Cruiser gives you a very similar sized vehicle to a 4Runner in terms of fitting into parking spaces and all of that, but then you get way more space inside. And so always look up the dimensions inside and out. And then when it comes to weight, the best thing for you to do is go in and look at the door jamb sticker on the car. And here's how to figure out the actual weight of the car, because the online figures are never accurate. Take the gross vehicle weight rating and then take the payload capacity. Subtract the payload capacity from the gross vehicle weight rating and you'll find the actual weight of the car. Again, I'll use the Land Cruiser as an example. If you look this up online, I think online it says this weighs like 5,700 pounds. When you take the gross vehicle weight rating and subtract the payload, you get a weight of 6,000 pounds, right? That's a decent difference of weight. And I've done this with tons of cars over the years as I've reviewed them, and I've always found that the actual weight of the car is heavier than what is put online. And the reason being is typically online doesn't include the car with all of the fluids, the gas and everything put into it. So that's just my recommendation there. Now, the next mistake that I see a lot of people making is not looking into the reliability of a car. And I know a lot of people are just going to throw their hands up and be like, no, that's not possible. It is very possible, because what a lot of people do is they just look at the brand and they assume reliability or a lack of reliability. You can't do that anymore. And I think all of the issues that Toyota has had over the last couple of years shows that you can't just look at a brand and assume reliability. So here's what you should do is you should look into the exact car that you're going to be purchasing and see what people are currently experiencing with that car. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have issues or a lack of issues, but it'll at least give you an idea. Now, the only way that you wouldn't be able to do this is if you're buying a brand new model from a manufacturer. And if you're going to be doing that, at that point, you have to just take on the test pilot mentality, understanding that you're buying a brand new car, right? That's probably going to have some issues that have to be worked out. So you're just going to have to deal with that in your ownership experience. It is the price you pay to be the kid with the cool car on the block. But don't just assume reliability. Look up reliability. And I'll tell you, with YouTube and just with the internet in general, there are so many resources when it comes to reliability. I mean, there are literally YouTube channels dedicated to talking about reliability. The Car Care Nut is a great example. Pretty much all his channel is about talking about common issues that you will have with cars. So there are plenty of resources out there. Now, the next big mistake that I see people making is not being honest with themselves in terms of the use case for the vehicle. Like, why are you buying this car? What are you actually going to use it for? What I see happening nowadays, time and time again, is people buy cars that have features that they are never going to use. And why do they do this? Well, one of the reasons is they're just buying the name brand, right? I have to drive a Porsche. I have to drive a BMW, right? It's usually some luxury brand, or, it could be something like this Land Cruiser, right? I want to have the Land Cruiser name. But are you actually going to do the Land Cruiser stuff with it? Or are you going to actually do the Porsche stuff with it? Whatever car, whatever brand it might be. Look at what that car was intended to do and ask yourself, am I actually going to be using it for that? If not, another car that is probably quite a bit more affordable will meet your needs for your specific use case. And the next thing on this particular subject is modifications. So there are a lot of cars that people could buy and put a very small amount of money when it comes to modifications into those cars to perfectly fit their use case rather than buying the crazy top of the line version. The example I'm going to give is a Jeep Wrangler. And I think that the TFL channel has shown this really well. So the Wrangler that everyone wants to buy is a Rubicon. Why? Because it's got the Rubicon name, it looks cool, it's got the locking differentials, the sway bar disconnect. But that stuff is only useful if you're basically going to live in Moab, Utah and do extreme rock crawling. If you're not going to do that, if you're just going to be, daily driving the Wrangler and occasionally going off-road, you don't need all the Rubicon equipment. You'd be better off doing what TFL did, where they bought a base model Wrangler and then threw on some all-terrain tires, and that thing is still extremely capable, still able to go a lot of places. So just be honest with yourself in terms of the actual use case. A lot of people, again, I'm not against dreaming, but a lot of people, their dreams are a lot bigger than the reality that they will actually live. And so before you buy a car, write down a list of what you're going to use that car for. Like, again, just be honest with yourself and then look at the features of that car and go, okay, does this car have the features that I want for the use case that I'm going to be using it for? Is there anything that I would need to add? If there is, well, is it inexpensive to add or is it expensive to add? Would it be better to go for a more top-line model like a Rubicon, or can I just get away with throwing some all-terrain tires on this? This would save people so much money if they actually did this. And again, this is one of the reasons as to why I see people trading cars so often is they're bouncing from car to car to car, trying to find one that actually meets their needs. And the reason this happens is they buy the car, they drive it, and they go, oh, it does this that I don't like. And it's like, well, if you had just written that down on a list, then you would have saw that, okay, well, this is bigger than what you need, or this is smaller than what you need. I think you guys get the point. Be honest with yourself when it comes to what you are actually looking for in the car. And now let's get into the fifth and final point, which is not looking into used cars. There are a lot of people that will never buy a used car. I understand, right? You don't want to buy someone else's problems. However, Because of the last point that I just mentioned, where people will buy cars that don't meet their needs because they don't think about their needs, there are so many cars with basically no miles that are used. It's always worth looking to see if you can get a better deal. My 250 Land Cruiser is a perfect example of that. The previous owner of that vehicle put like 3,500 miles on it and then traded in because they didn't want anything to have to do with it. So I was able to get that first edition Land Cruiser for less than what I would have paid for it brand new, and it's basically brand new. It only had 3,500 miles on it. I have like, I think almost 7,000 or 7,000 miles on it at this point. So you can definitely get better deals. You might not be able to get exactly what you want, but like, again, that Land Cruiser is a great example where I'm like, I don't care what color it is because I'm saving money on buying that vehicle. I'll let the first guy take the depreciation for me. The next reason as to why you should look at used vehicles, even if you're definitely not going to purchase one, is to see how well the vehicle holds up and to see what the resale value on that vehicle is. If a lot more people looked at resale value and how well vehicles hold up over mileage, I think that a lot of people would stop purchasing the vehicles that they currently purchase. When it comes to resale value, I think a lot of people will be shocked with how much value cars lose with a very small amount of mileage and a very small amount of age, especially the cars that are currently being produced, the iPhone cars, as I call them. And so it's definitely worth looking into, at least from a value perspective. And then when it comes to how well the car holds up, I think this is just always worth it. I'll use, again, myself as an example. Before I purchased my wife her Toyota Sequoia, we bought a 2021 Toyota Sequoia. I went and drove a 2017 Toyota Sequoia, same generation, with 170,000 miles on the odometer. Why did I go and drive one with 170,000 miles even though we weren't going to purchase one with that many miles? I wanted to see how well the car would hold up with, that's not like extremely high mileage for a Toyota, but that's decently high mileage. And what I discovered is, well, some components are going to show some wear and tear. The seats, for example, are going to show a little bit over time. You know, some of the items in the interior are going to loosen up over time as you use them, like the shifter, for example. The door might sound a little bit clunky, but the suspension in the car, beautiful, right? That was on original shocks and everything, and it just floated down the road. The engine performed absolutely perfectly. And so what that showed me is, well, if we go and buy a used Sequoia with that generation and we put 170,000 miles on it, it's going to have a few things here and there that might be a little bit annoying, but the car itself is going to run and drive perfectly fine. So this is probably the car we're going to go for, because I did not see the same thing with other cars we were comparing to. Like, we looked at the, GM vehicles, right? The Tahoe, Suburban, all of that. And what I discovered is, well, a bunch of them are sitting at dealer lots because they need new engines, and the interiors just don't hold up very well. Like, again, that Sequoia, everything worked, and there was pretty minimal wear showing on a lot of the interior elements. Like, they still, were pretty easy to use. And the reason I say pretty easy to use is with the GM SUVs with high mileage, what I noticed is like all the faces on the buttons were rubbed off. Like, you couldn't even see what button did what anymore because of how much had been rubbed off. And so it's just always worth looking into. So those are the 5 things that I see people do when it comes to mistakes with purchasing a car. There are more mistakes that you can make outside of this, but if you at least avoid these 5 mistakes, then you are much less likely to overpay for a car, and you're much less likely to buy the wrong car. The biggest mistake that you can make is buying the wrong car, because cars are depreciating items. And so if you buy the right car the first time, that'll save you all the money in the world.